What is up, ladies and gentlemen of YouTube? Today I'm going to do a Greek gods tier list. I know it's not my usual content, but I thought it'd be fun to do, so we're just going to hop right into it. And we're going to start off with Aphrodite. So Aphrodite is a very iconic character. She's not the personification of love. Eros is the personification of love. Eros is the one who shoots the arrows that make mortals fall in love. But Aphrodite, she's the goddess of love. She's the goddess of sexual desire. She's very prevalent in the myths. She's often making trouble in the myths. In the Trojan War, for example, she was the one that received the apple of discord, and in return for getting the apple, she gave Paris, who was the mortal who deemed her worthy of the apple. She gave Paris Helen, who was the most beautiful woman in the world, in return. So she's a cool character. She does play a big role in the myths, and it's hard not to put Aphrodite high. I mean, she's just so iconic, so integral to the myths. I'm gonna put her B for now. I might put her higher later once I see what I have up, but it's hard not to put her high. I mean, she's so active in the myths. Next up is Apollo. Apollo is the god of the sun. He's the god of music. He's also one of the archer. He's an archer alongside Artemis. He's another important god. He's the twin of Artemis, the twin brother. His father is Zeus, his mother is Leto, and he was an important god to the Greeks. He was also associated with prophecy, and one of his temples were in Delphi, and it was said that he had an oracle there that all the Greek world would come to in order to receive their prophecies from. He's one of the really important gods to the Greeks. I would put him at B alongside Aphrodite. It's really hard not to put him high. Ares. So Ares, the thing about Ares is that the way he's depicted in the actual myths and the way that he's depicted in popular culture are very different. In popular culture, he's portrayed as this just absolutely stunning warrior, or an absolutely fearsome warrior. But in the myths, he's often portrayed as he is portrayed as very fearsome sometimes. He does represent more so a very savage, warlike nature. But he is also portrayed as a coward very often, and he's often portrayed as one. I think what is it? I think that in the myths, I think that Zeus actually says that of all the gods, Ares is the one that he likes the least, or that he hates the most. So the Olympians don't really like Ares, and it's really because he's a troublemaker. He's often portrayed as a coward, and I'm gonna put him D for that reason. You know, I think the depictions in popular culture really don't match what he's portrayed as in the Greek myths. So next up we have Artemis. She is the twin sister of Apollo, also one of the offspring of Leto and Zeus. She's the goddess of the hunt, goddess of the moon. She was one of the virgin goddesses alongside Hestia and Demeter. And I do like Artemis just because of how different she is than all the other gods. She sort of represents her own ideal. And the Greeks really love to push or at least test gender boundaries. And so that's why Artemis is interesting, because she does sort of represent one of those typical gender boundaries being crossed. I would say Athena is another one who represents that. But she's a cool god, and I would put her at A, to be honest. I mean, she's a very cool goddess. And next up we have Athena, and I know right away where I'm gonna put Athena. Athena is my favorite of all the gods on here. And for me, it's because Athena represents another one of those unconventional gods. She's very unique. She's the patron of Athens. She's the goddess of wisdom, goddess of strategic warfare. She's sort of the golden child of Zeus. I really enjoy her persona in the myths. You could tell in the myths that Zeus loves her. She represents civilization too. She represents a more civilized way of warfare, I suppose, as opposed to Ares. In my opinion, she's a very interesting character too. She always seems to be trying to do the right thing in the myths, and she cares very much about the balance in the order in Olympus. There's a scene in the Iliad where she dresses down her brother Ares when he was about to go and cause some havoc because she was worried about Olympus and the disorder it would cause. And I think scenes like that really show her character, and that the Greeks really looked up to her because she represented purity and wisdom to them. And I really think those are it's hard not to appreciate those ideals in a character and in a god. So Demeter is next. Demeter was a goddess of harvest and agriculture. She was one of the daughters of Kronos and Rhea. She was one of the virgin goddesses, and she was an important goddess to the Greeks. She isn't mentioned much in the myths, but she was important for their culture and their everyday life. I suppose she's not a goddess we would think about much today, because obviously most people don't have to farm for their food today. So unlike the Greeks where that was common, we don't have to think about sort of a goddess like that and those sort of processes. So she was important to the Greeks, but since she wasn't very important in the myths and she doesn't have a very strong character, I'm gonna put her in C, just because she doesn't really have much characterization. So Dionysus is a very fun one. He's the god of wine, obviously, also theater. I think he had a special place in the hearts of the Greeks, because they did love their wine, they did love their theater, they did love their partying, or their symposiums. That was what their sort of parties were called. I do think that the Greek representations of him are they're fun, so I'll put him at B. So Eos was a personification of dawn, and she's more often used in the Greek myths as sort of just a metaphorical figure. They often say Eos spread her rosy fingers over the horizon or something like that in the myths, and so she's often just used as a personification of a forest. So she doesn't really have much of a character, and for that reason I have to put her at I'll put her at D. She's not really much of a character, she's just more of a personification. And next we have Hades. Hades was god of the dead, king of the underworld, and he was one of the sons of Kronos and Rhea alongside Poseidon and Zeus. And being king of the underworld, he often gets a bad rep. Just like Ares, he's another one of those gods who has a very different depiction in popular culture than he actually did in the Greek myths. Today we often portray him as the devil or as a very dark and evil figure, but in the Greek myths, that's not really how they portrayed him. They portrayed him just more as like a normal king. He doesn't really appear too much in the myths in my reading experience. He doesn't appear in in the Iliad too much, for example. He's often, they use his name interchangeably with the underworld. So, Hades is a place, not just his name. It's also used as a term for the place. So he isn't characterized a ton, but he is in the myths. The myths that I am familiar with him, they are his abduction of Persephone. Obviously that doesn't make him look like such a good guy, but there are other myths where he is more fair. In the Tale of Orpheus, for example, he does allow Orpheus to get his wife Eurydice back from the underworld, only on the condition that he doesn't look back at her before he returns to Earth. There's also other myths where he does allow mortals to what would you say? He allows them to reunite with other mortals who ended up in the underworld, and so he often bargains in a lot of tales, and he is generally portrayed as fair. There are some instances, I think, especially the abduction of Persephone, where he does appear evil, though. But I would say, in general, his character is characterized as fair. But he doesn't have a super strong character, and his character doesn't really stand out to me. So I'm gonna put him at C. So next up is Hecate, and she is a goddess of witchcraft. To my understanding, she isn't portrayed much in the myths. So for that reason, I'm gonna put her at F, because I don't believe she's a very strong character, and I don't believe it's a character that the Greeks really fleshed out that much. So next up is Helios, and he's the god of the sun. He was a titan, and I'm also gonna put him F, just because I feel like he's overshadowed by Apollo, who also represents the sun, and I feel like he's a pretty forgettable character because there is another god associated with the sun. So next up we have Hephaestus, and he was a blacksmith of the gods. He did have a lame leg, because there is a story that when Hera gave birth to him, she found him so ugly that she threw him down from Olympus, and when he fell, he broke his leg. And so he is described as the most ugly of the gods, but he makes up for it by creating very beautiful and very elaborate inventions and technology. So I feel like he has an interesting character. You often, when you think of a god, you often think of someone who's perfect and beautiful. But since Hephaestus breaks that stereotype, I think he has a more interesting character, and he's more unique amongst the gods. So I'm gonna put him at B. So next up is Hera. She's the queen of the gods. She's also a god of marriage and matrimony. She's the queen of Olympus, and she is a very strong character in the myths. She's often portrayed as very powerful, and she often tricks Zeus. She seduces Zeus several times. She's often very vengeful towards Zeus when she gets into extramarital relationships, and she is portrayed as very powerful. And she does have a great dynamic, I think, with Zeus in the myths, where they're always bickering at each other, or at other times they're getting along with each other as a happy couple. So I think the dynamic between her and Zeus is really fun, and I'm gonna put her A. I'm not gonna lie. She has a strong character, and I think it'd be an injustice to put her lower than A. So next is Hermes. Hermes is a god of thieves, also commerce. He was a messenger of the gods. He was a psychopomp, which means that he was a guide for souls in the underworld. He was also a guide of heroes very often. He often helped heroes in the myths. And so, his character, he isn't, in my experience reading about him, he isn't characterized super interestingly, but he is an important character. He does have a lot of important roles, and for that reason, I'll put him at B. So Hestia is a goddess of the hearth. She is one of the virgin goddesses. She is a daughter of Kronos and Rhea, and she is one of the more forgettable characters. She does not appear in the myths really at all, and so I really don't even have much to say about her. I'm just going to put her F, because there isn't really much to go off of it. There isn't much of a character there. So Nyx is the goddess of the night, and she's more of a personification. You don't really see her appear too often in the myths either, except for as a personification, and so there isn't much of a character to go off of there either, so I'm gonna put her F. So next up is Pan. He's a goat god. He was a god of the wilderness, shepherds, and flocks, and I don't have much to say about him. There isn't much to say beyond the fact that he was a goat god. He often appeared with the nymphs as their consort, and I do believe that the Christians took inspiration for their image of the devil from the image of Pan. But I don't have a whole lot to say about him. I don't think he ranks too high. I'd put him at D. So next up is Persephone. She was the goddess of the underworld, queen of the underworld, daughter of Demeter. So she's also the goddess of spring, and she was kidnapped by Hades and brought to the underworld. And the story goes that Hades offered her a pomegranate, and since she ate the pomegranate, she had to spend about half the year, I believe, in the underworld and half the year on the overworld or Earth. And so Demeter got her for half the time, and Hades got her for half the time. And so Persephone she's a cool figure. She's a cool figure to think about. It's cool to think about what the goddess of the underworld would be like. But she doesn't appear that often in the myths, so we don't really have a strong character to go off of. So I'm gonna put her at C. Next we have Poseidon. Poseidon was king of the seas. He was god of the seas, and he was often depicted with his trident. And he was the second most powerful god, only second to Zeus. In the myths, actually, he often thinks of himself as an equal to Zeus, since they're both sons of the same parents, since they both are kings. He often thinks of himself as an equal, and he often wants to be an equal. And Zeus often has to put him in his place. But him and Zeus do have that sort of competition going. And I do think he has an interesting character, and I would put him at A. So Selene, she's the goddess of the moon. Once again, she doesn't really have a strong character in the myths, so I'm gonna put her at F. And lastly, we have Zeus, who is god of thunder, god of Olympus, god of the gods. He was king of the gods. His symbol was a thunderbolt, and he was sort of the head honcho. He's obviously pretty well known for all the affairs he has. He also dethroned his father Kronos, and he fought the Titans in the Titanomachy, and that war put the Olympians in power and gave them control over Olympus. And he was also the god who fought Typhon, which was a monster the Titans sent to destroy the Olympians. So he plays a very significant role in the Greek myths. He's arguably the most important Greek god, and it's hard not to put him S, honestly. He's just too important, and he just appears too much in the myths not to be that high. And so yeah, that's my tier list. Let me know what you think in the comments below, and let me know if you would place anyone higher or lower. Thanks for watching. Bye bye.